Welcome to One on One, the Daily Items weekly digital program featuring Susquehanna Valley newsmakers interviewed by Daily Item reporters. Today's guest is certified QPR trainer Anne Katona-Linn, interviewed by editor John Zaktansky.
Sunbury Motors Ford knows many of you will be heading to the Bloomsburg Fair, so they need to sell cars now. Sunbury Motors is going to price all new Fords at a level that makes it impossible to say no. You'll be feeling great driving to the fair in a 2018 Ford Escape for only $18,820.
Welcome to the Daily Items One-on-One. I'm John Zaktansky, and today our guest is certified QPR trainer Anne Katona-Linn. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We want to jump into September is National Suicide Awareness Month, and we want to make sure we touch upon that. QPR obviously is a training involving intervention for suicide, so we want to jump into that first. Though, what kind of personal things have you so connected to the suicide beat within the area?
I have had a lot of personal experiences, unfortunately. I've had a lot of childhood friends that actually died by suicide. In the last 6 years, we have had 5 paddling friends. My husband and I do kayaking and stand-up paddleboarding on whitewater. And we've had 5 friends who have died by suicide. And it's been really difficult because it's a close-knit community and a lot of people, everybody knows everyone, and so it really is hit the community pretty hard, and people are wondering what is going on. I have struggled with my own mental illness with post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety, but my goal is to be able to give people hope and to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel and there is something better.
Sure. Now, obviously, suicide, it seems to be a topic that's all over the place right now, and there's so many local examples. How bad is the suicide epidemic, if we can call it that, in the area right now?
In the United States, 99% of counties increased their suicide rate within the last, from 2005 to 2015, increased their suicide rate by 10% or more. And in Northumberland County, the rate is 15.9 per 100,000 deaths. So 15.9 are those of suicide. And in Snyder County, it's 10.1 per 100,000, and Union County is 8.7 deaths per 100,000. So I think one of the big things is that the rates have really increased tremendously in rural areas. So the highest rates are actually in rural parts of Pennsylvania. So Elk County, Wayne County, and Schuylkill County are the highest rates in Pennsylvania, and the lowest is Philadelphia, which is really interesting because I think that people don't realize, they think, the violence, but when it comes to suicide, that it is really a much more rural issue.
Sure. Well, you mentioned a drastic increase. What do you think's behind the drastic increase? Because I know, when I was growing up as a teenager, you barely heard about the concept of suicide, and now it just seems to be everywhere.
Yeah, and middle-aged white males have had the highest increase in rate. I think a lot of it has been due to the opioid crisis. That some of the risk factors are just stressors. So the opioid crisis has created a lot of stress. And the challenge is it's really difficult to get the numbers right because a lot of times people may be taking drugs to self-medicate and may want to die, but they may die by an overdose even though they had the intention of killing themselves. So it's really hard to find some of the numbers. And for some of those lower counties, too, it's a little bit more difficult. But the opioid crisis, stress, just in general, I think the amount of stressors, not just personal stressors, but also the collective. Since 9/11, we've seen increases and the school shootings and a lot of violence in general. One of the highest rates is also ease of access to, the highest rate of suicide is by firearms. And I think ease of access, especially if we're talking in rural areas, they're more likely to have access to guns. And so that's a big piece of why, as well as there's less access to mental health services, including stigma that prevents people from getting mental health services. So the Hispanic and Black communities actually have much lower rates of suicide as opposed to the white communities. And also Native American have a lot higher rate of suicide as well.
Wow. Obviously, there's certain misconceptions, and we did a series called Shattering the Stigma about suicide a couple of years ago. What kind of misconceptions and inaccuracies are out there about suicide that kind of turn people off to getting the help they really need?
Probably the biggest one is if we talk about it, then that's going to give someone an idea. And that is absolutely not the case at all, is that people want to talk and want to get help, but they really are so ashamed that they don't know what to do. And talking is such a huge piece. I think another one is that, especially teenagers, they're just doing it for attention. And if they say they're going to die by suicide, that doesn't really mean that they're going to do it. If they're talking about it, they could potentially be doing it. Only certain types of people become suicidal. So people have, their vision of those people, whatever that is. But it is a myth, and there are no demographics that are not touched by suicide, and so it really goes across everyone. Every death is preventable. That's another myth. Just because, yes, suicide is preventable, but sometimes you just really don't know. And people get so good at hiding things that you don't realize. And so there are just so many factors that make suicide complex. It's difficult to say that every single one is preventable. Once a person is committed to doing suicide, once they want to have a suicide and they have a plan, that there's no stopping them. And that's not the case as well. So I think those are probably some of the biggest myths around suicide.
Sure. Well, we mentioned a little bit ago, I mentioned a little bit ago that you're a certified QPR trainer. Mm-hmm. How long have you been doing that, and what exactly is QPR?
So QPR is called Question, Persuade, Refer. I've been a trainer for the last 2.5 years, and it is essentially CPR for mental and emotional health. So it is targeted at suicide, but it really can be for any type of mental illness or addiction, anybody who's struggling mentally or emotionally. I see so many of the strategies learning QPR, and this is really for the public. This is not just for people who are specialists or counselors or doctors. Those people absolutely should get this information, but QPR is designed to be able to share with large parts of the public, and that similar to CPR, that we want to get everybody, as many people as trained as possible.
What kind of QPR trainings have you done in the area lately, and how can people get access to that?
I have done through the United Way. We did a youth event. So anyone who was serving youth, that was in February, I think, of this year, and that was at the IU. And that was, we had coaches and Boy Scout leaders and some people who work in group homes, or a variety of different people, and counselors. We had a variety of people there, and paraprofessionals. So I think that that's one good example. I've done them also for churches, because churches want to help people, but again, don't always know exactly how to do that. So QPR is an 1.5 to 2 hour training that is available through the Garrett Lee Smith state grant. It's a federal grant at the state level, as well as McDowell Institute at Bloomsburg University. There are many QPR trainers now being trained across the state. So they're being offered really almost for free, maybe just for the materials, on a regular basis across the state. So I would say Prevent Suicide PA is one place to go, and also the McDowell Institute at Bloomsburg University, as well as the United Way. That they can. Those are some of the key places where you can find out more about QPR training.
Okay, sounds good. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment.
Sunbury Motors has to sell 7 new Fords every day from now till the Bloomsburg Fair. Pack up the family in your 2018 Explorer. Explorers start under 30 grand at SMC, and they have 20 to choose from. Every Edge, Focus, Fusion, Fiesta, EcoSport will be discounted for SMC to sell 7 new Fords every day from now till the fair.
Welcome back. This is John Zaktansky with the Daily Item, and with us is Anne Katona-Linn, certified QPR trainer. Jumping back into the conversation, Anne, what are some signs? I mean, let's say you have a friend who seems down, who seems a little off, so to speak. At what point do you think someone should intervene? At what point should someone do something?
I mean, we all have days that we may struggle a little bit, but the key is if you see them really change their regular routines, if you see changes in their habits, such as eating or their clothing, and that maybe they're not taking a shower as often. Maybe they're eating more, they're eating less. Maybe they stop going to church or they start going to church. They could be giving away some of their prized possessions and things especially that that they would really care about and giving them away, or telling people things, such as I just want you to know that you're a good friend of mine. You've been a good friend of mine. And not that that's a bad thing, but again, when you look at a lot of these things individually, again, you see crying or some of those emotional pieces like that, or if there's been a major life event. But when you look at all of these things together, that's the key. It's not any one piece in isolation. That's why it's so important for people to communicate with each other. I think this is why breaking the stigma and allowing us all to talk about mental illness and just mental emotional struggles and talk about suicide openly, that's going to help with identifying some of those missed signals.
Sure. Now, in a recent interview, we talked about this topic, and you mentioned specifically the concept that if someone is overindulging in a favorite activity, you mentioned paddling. Obviously, paddling is a positive activity, but another sign or symptom may be someone who overindulges in that type of an activity.
Absolutely. If they are maybe self-medicating, maybe having riskier behaviors, and I think about that, and so many things that we do are a little bit more risky. But again, when you take that into the larger context and look at those pieces, with maybe they're having some struggles at home, having those communications are really critical. But yeah, absolutely, good things can become addictive if they are using it to escape their emotions. And I think that's really the key, is that we need to make sure, and I know for us as paddlers, we try to make sure we connect with everybody as much as possible and really talk about the difficult things and share our own stories of struggles, because not everything is perfect, and we need to be able to talk about it.
Well, talking leads into where I want to go next is how do you start that conversation? You see someone who's struggling. It's obviously probably pretty scary to walk up to someone and say, hey, what's going on? How do you recommend we start a conversation with someone who we feel might be struggling?
Yeah, the key is we really want to talk about it directly, but we don't want to go to a place where we're going to shut them down. Like, oh, you're just acting poorly. What's wrong with you? You just seem so miserable. So we want to avoid doing those things. But we want to say, hey, I've noticed some of these things, that you've changed a little bit, and I've noticed that you've been doing this a little bit more, and you seem a little bit more down, and your Facebook posts seem to be a little bit more depressing. Are you okay? I really care about you, and I want to make sure that I am here to support you, and that if you ever need anything. So can we talk about that a little bit more? That's kind of an opening, and then from there you can go a little bit further to get them, just really the biggest thing is to listen. Just let them talk, and talk to them non-judgmentally, and let them just share. Because a lot of times just asking that question can open up a huge door, and them being able to share and feel safe. That's another critical piece. That's the first step into really, really getting help.
Sure. And then once you get a sense that somebody might need help, how do you take that next leap to get someone who might already be self-conscious about their concerns and to take them to a point where you can persuade them to get help? How do you do that persuade part?
The key is really, again, letting them know that you really care about them. That's critical, no matter what part of the process you're in. You have to always really let them know, like, look, I love you, I want you, or I care about you, whatever your relationship is. I want to make sure that you're okay. So can we talk about some options for maybe, getting help? Are you willing to get help? One of the key things too, when we're talking in that phase, we want to ask them, do you want to die by suicide, or do you want to hurt yourself? Do you want to kill yourself? We want to avoid saying commit, because that sounds more like a sin, but we really want to focus on, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Do you want to do that? And do you have a plan? Those are the two key questions that we want to make sure that we're asking people, so that we can really get to the root of the problem. That's where the persuade comes in. But again, non-judgmentally, letting them know we care and we're there to help them, and that we want to do whatever we possibly can. That may mean that we may not be, even if we can't do something right away, we want to think about, I want to get you help, let's connect with this person. Or asking them, is there anyone that you really care about that maybe you don't feel comfortable talking to me as much? Who do you feel that who do you trust that you really can talk to? And let's go see if we could find them, or let's call them. Really kind of doing those things right in the moment, rather than, kind of letting them go.
Sure. And you mentioned a couple things already as far as what not to do, like not to use the word commit. Are there any other things that we should try to stay away from that might impede that person getting help?
It's really making judgmental statements like, oh, you're just such a drama queen, or, you're just doing this for attention. And, I don't really believe, I think you're just trying to get out of doing, of managing your responsibilities, or you're trying to get sympathy. Those are all things that we really don't want to say. The key is, and another one is not making them feel guilty. So not saying to them, can you even think about what your family, how much they're going to suffer if you do this? That really is they're already thinking about that their family may be better off without them. And so to kind of trigger that is, again, we don't want to put shame on people. That's not going to be effective. They need hope. And that's the absolute most critical thing, is that they need to know that there is a place to get help. And it may not happen overnight that they're going to get better, but there are different things to do to get help, and that 80% of people who actually do get help for mental health issues see results and see improvement. I know in my own life and in my family's life, we've had tremendous results. So
good. We talked about the Q, the questioning, and of course the conversation. We talked about the P, the persuade, the referral part. How do we go about the steps of getting someone the help they need, and what locally is there when it comes to making a referral and getting someone help?
There are a lot more resources now. Prevent Suicide PA is a website that has a lot of resources, and you can find local resources from there. Another option is to dial 211. Which is through the United Way now, and it's kind of like a 911 for everything else other than physical emergencies, so that you can at least get connected with someone to find out where you can get some support. There are also crisis hotlines for Northumberland County, and then Snyder, Union, Montour, and Columbia also have a hotline as well. So those are other places. But local human services, even, you can go to a church or go to a family friend and Google things. A lot of it you can do, you can find things by Google. Another key thing is the text line. So if anyone is struggling, the text line, if you want to text for suicide help or any emotional help, is 741-741, especially when we're talking youth, because it may not be as comfortable to talk on the phone. So allowing them to be able to text with somebody may be a little bit more comfortable for them.
Sure. And we, a lot of this interview obviously has been talking about someone who wants to intervene for somebody else. What would you say to someone who might be watching this episode who might be struggling themselves, as far as the importance of getting help and the importance of why they should take that step, and why that there's a light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, I think probably one of the key things is that I have had my own struggles, And my family, we've had a lot of struggles in our family, and taking that first step is the hardest step. But once you take that step and start having the conversations, the other side has so much freedom. It may not always be easy along the way, but it truly is a freedom where you can feel healing and feel better than you ever have before. For me, I know I've been able to use what I've learned and what I've kind of battled, all the struggles that I've had, to be able to help others. And to me, that's extremely empowering. So to think that something that you can do can really help someone else is tremendously powerful.
Sure, and we're just
there's
about.
hope.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, we're just about out of time. One last quick question: what kind of ripple effect can suicide have on those left behind? The what ifs, the doubts, the
Yeah.
miscues, maybe that type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. They think, what did I miss? Could I have stopped this? And the guilt and the shame just can be really tremendous. And they even say, well, I did talk to them about them, and I did tell them to get help, and I did all those things. But, again, it's so complex. You can't say that every single suicide is preventable. But, the more that we are aware, the better. I think probably one final piece is that we have to be aware of that people who have experienced suicide by someone else in their family or close friends, they are at higher risk of suicide themselves. Wow. So we've got to really be aware of that and create support.
Great. Well, that's all for today. Thank you very much. Again, I'm John Zaktansky with the Daily Item, and this is Anne Katona-Linn. Thanks again, Anne, for being with us today, and look forward to checking in next week.
Thanks for watching One on One. We hope you'll come back next Thursday for another edition.